Welcome back, everybody. Today we're diving into a topic that you guys flagged as super interesting.
Yeah.
U.S. cryptocurrency policy under the second Trump administration.
Right.
You sent over a really fascinating mix of White House documents, expert opinions, news analysis.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to unpack.
Right. It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
Especially given Trump's history with crypto.
Right. Yeah.
Remember back in 2019?
Oh, yeah.
When he was calling Bitcoin a scam?
Oh, I definitely remember that.
Yeah.
And yet here we are in 2025 with a Trump-signed executive order.
Right.
Practically laying out the red carpet for digital assets.
I know.
What caused such a dramatic shift? I mean...
One theory is that there was potential influence from campaign contributions by crypto investors.
Oh, interesting.
But let's go deeper than that and look at the executive order itself.
Okay.
It was issued on January 23rd, 2025, and it's pretty clear about its objectives.
Okay, let's break it down.
Okay.
First up, it pushes for the use of open public blockchains. What exactly does that mean for someone like me?
Think of it like this open blockchains mean no single entity,
Okay.
whether it's a company or a government, can control the network.
Right.
It's similar to how the internet is structured,
Okay.
which the order seems to be aiming for.
Okay.
In theory, this could mean more freedom and control of your own financial activities as you'd be less reliant on traditional financial institutions.
Interesting. So less reliance on the big banks.
Right.
More individual control. Okay, I see why you flagged this as potentially game-changing.
Yeah.
What else does the executive order focus on?
Another key objective is promoting the use of dollar-backed stablecoins.
Okay.
This is where it gets interesting for international finance.
Okay.
Imagine sending money overseas as easily as you send a text and with much lower fees.
Wow.
That's part of the appeal of stablecoins.
So a stable coin is a cryptocurrency, but its value is pegged to the U.S. dollar.
Exactly.
So it has the benefits of crypto, but with less of the notorious price volatility.
Exactly. This could be a way to blend the stability of the U.S. dollar with the efficiency and speed of blockchain tech.
Right.
And the executive order seems to be saying the U.S. wants to lead the charge on this.
Okay, I'm starting to understand why this is such a big deal.
Yeah.
But there's one more big thing this order addresses, right?
Yes.
The whole no U.S. CBDC stance.
You're right. It explicitly blocks the creation of a U.S. central bank digital currency.
Right.
Which is a very different direction than some other countries are taking.
Oh, yeah.
China, for example, has been aggressively developing its own CBDC,
Right.
the digital yuan.
So while China is pushing for more centralized control over its digital currency, the U.S. is saying no thanks and betting on these decentralized assets like Bitcoin instead.
That seems to be the case.
Wow.
Now, there are a lot of potential reasons behind this,
Right.
Some more controversial than others.
Sure.
Some experts worry about the potential impact of a CBDC on financial privacy and individual freedom.
Right.
Others point to the potential risk to the sovereignty of the U.S. dollar.
Okay, it's a huge decision.
Huge.
With potentially huge consequences.
Yeah.
So this executive order lays out a clear preference for decentralized digital assets.
Right.
But then there's this other element that seems to contradict that a little.
Yeah.
The whole idea of a national digital asset stockpile.
Right. That's where things get a little more complex.
Yeah.
Traditionally, if the U.S. government seized Bitcoin through, say, law enforcement activities, they'd auction it off.
Right.
But this executive order hints at a different strategy, potentially holding on to that Bitcoin and creating a national reserve.
Hold on. So the government would be holding millions, maybe even billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin.
It's possible.
Wouldn't that make them a major player in the market?
Oh, yeah.
Potentially influencing the price?
It's definitely a bold move, and it sparked a lot of debate.
I bet.
Some experts view it as a brilliant strategic play to challenge the dollar's rivals, like euro or the Chinese yuan.
I see.
Um,
But wouldn't that also expose the U.S. to Bitcoin's infamous volatility? That seems like a risky gamble, especially with taxpayer money on the line. What do you make of it?
well, there are valid arguments on both sides.
Right.
It comes down to risk tolerance and your belief in Bitcoin's long-term prospects.
Sure.
Those who see Bitcoin as the future of finance might view this as a smart investment.
Right.
Others might see it as reckless.
Yeah.
It all comes down to perspective.
I see what you mean. It really makes you think, what would you say are the biggest risks and potential benefits of this stockpile idea? It's clear this executive order has the potential to shake things up, but to what extent remains to be seen.
Exactly. It's like we're standing at a crossroads.
Yeah.
One path leads towards a decentralized financial future, potentially powered by Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies.
Right.
The other path is less clear, but it likely involves more government control and the rise of CBDCs, like China's digital yuan.
And the U.S. seems to be planting its flag firmly in the decentralized camp.
It seems that way.
But we've only just begun to scratch the surface of this complex and rapidly evolving landscape. There are still so many questions to consider.
So many.
What does this mean for the future of the U.S. dollar? How will other countries react?
Right.
What are the ethical implications of a national Bitcoin reserve?
You're hitting on all the key points, and we're going to dive into all those questions and more as we continue our deep dive into this fascinating topic.
Okay, great. I'm excited to learn more about this.
Me too.
Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Sounds good. Welcome back. Last time we were discussing Trump's executive order on crypto and how it signals a major shift in U.S. policy.
Right.
We talked about open blockchains, stable coins, and that eyebrow-raising idea of a national digital asset stockpile.
Right. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
It's all pretty high-level stuff, though.
Sure.
What I'm really curious about is what this all means for everyday Americans.
Right.
How could this actually impact our lives?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And honestly, it's still early to say with certainty.
Right.
But we can explore some potential implications, both positive and, of course, those we need to be wary of.
Okay, so let's start with the potential upsides. This push for crypto,
Okay.
does it have the potential to benefit the average person?
One of the most compelling arguments I've seen is that this executive order could be a major catalyst for innovation,
Okay.
particularly in the tech sector. Think of it like a new gold rush.
Okay.
But instead of gold, it's blockchain technology.
A Silicon Valley for cryptos kind of thing.
Exactly. The executive order specifically mentions creating a regulatory environment that encourages the development of new blockchain technologies and applications.
Right.
That could lead to a boom in new businesses, job creation, and maybe even entirely new industries we haven't even imagined yet.
Wow, that's a pretty optimistic view.
Yeah.
But you're right, looking back at how the internet changed everything, maybe this IS, that kind of moment. Okay, I'm cautiously optimistic. But what about the potential downsides? What should we be watching out for?
A valid concern is the potential for increased financial instability.
Yeah.
We've talked about Bitcoin's volatility.
Right.
Now imagine that volatility magnified if crypto becomes deeply integrated into the U.S. financial system.
Okay. Yeah, I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
That kind of instability could ripple out and affect everything, the stock market, retirement savings. Even if I'm not directly investing in Bitcoin, my life could still be impacted.
Precisely. And there's the ever-present risk of scams and fraud.
Right.
Anytime you have a new industry that's growing this fast, there are going to be bad actors looking to exploit the situation.
Crypto seems particularly vulnerable to that, too.
Yeah.
It's decentralized and often anonymous,
Right.
which makes it harder to track down those responsible.
Right.
That sounds like a nightmare for law enforcement.
You're not wrong. That's why robust consumer protection measures are going to be crucial.
Right.
The executive order does mention regulatory clarity and consumer protection,
Okay.
but the details are still pretty vague.
So it's one thing to say you're going to create a safe and transparent crypto market,
Right.
but making it a reality is a whole other challenge.
Absolutely. And that brings up another potential consequence that some people are really worried about.
Okay.
Increased government surveillance.
Wait, how does crypto lead to more government surveillance? I thought it was all about privacy and individual control.
That is the ideal. However, if the government wants to prevent things like money laundering and tax evasion in this new crypto world, they're going to need mechanisms to track transactions.
I get it. It's that classic balance between security and liberty. It's a tough line to walk. Okay, so we've talked about the economic side of things.
Right.
But this executive order also raises some pretty big ethical questions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Uh-huh.
The concept of a national Bitcoin reserve, for example, has sparked a lot of debate.
Yeah, it does feel a little contradictory.
It does.
On one hand, the government is promoting crypto as this revolutionary technology,
Right.
but then they're turning around and hoarding a huge chunk of Bitcoin for themselves.
The optics aren't great, are they?
No.
Some critics are calling it hypocritical and raising concerns about fairness and transparency.
Right.
If the government becomes a major player in the crypto market, how can we ensure they're not manipulating the market for their own benefit?
That's a good point. And it ties into a bigger concern about government accountability. This whole situation with crypto, it's new territory.
Right.
There's always a risk that the government will overreach, using this as an excuse to expand their power and control.
It's a valid concern, especially when we're talking about the future of money.
Right.
The stakes are incredibly high.
Absolutely.
Right.
So it seems like we need a lot more transparency and open discussion about the ethical implications of this whole thing.
I couldn't agree more.
Huh.
We need to establish some ground rules, some safeguards to make sure the government's involvement in the crypto space benefits all Americans and doesn't just serve their own interests.
Well said. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of this potential crypto revolution. But we can't lose sight of the potential risks and ethical dilemmas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of the bigger picture, this isn't just a U.S. story.
Right.
Trump's crypto executive order has the potential to trigger some major shifts on the global stage.
Okay.
We've touched on this idea of a currency war, but it goes even deeper than that.
You mean how this could affect the U.S.'s relationship with other countries?
Precisely. As we move further into this digital realm, financial power dynamics are going to shift.
Right.
The U.S. dollar has been the dominant global reserve currency for decades.
Right.
But now, with the rise of cryptocurrencies and CBDCs, things are getting a lot more complicated.
Okay, so we're back, and we were just talking about how the U.S. dollar has been the dominant global reserve currency for decades.
Right.
But now, with the rise of cryptocurrencies and CBDCs, like we've been talking about, things are getting a lot more complicated.
A lot more complicated.
So this executive order,
Right.
will these changes strengthen America's position globally, or could it actually weaken it?
That is the trillion-dollar question, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It is. Let's start with the potential for new alliances forming. The executive order talks about working with other countries
Sure.
that share a similar vision for crypto.
Yeah.
So could we see the U.S. teaming up with nations that are already crypto-friendly?
It's definitely a possibility.
Like who?
Well, imagine the U.S. forming strong partnerships with countries like El Salvador,
Right.
which made Bitcoin legal tender a few years back, or Switzerland, which has become a haven for crypto businesses.
So you'd have this block of nations working together, setting standards for the crypto world,
Yeah.
and maybe even challenging the authority of institutions like the IMF and the World Bank.
Exactly. It could be a new kind of financial alliance, one built around the idea of decentralization, supporting innovation, and empowering individuals.
That's a pretty compelling vision.
It is.
But on the flip side, what about the potential for this executive order to spark rivalries or even conflict?
Sure.
Not every country is going to be on board with the U.S.'s vision for a crypto-powered future.
You're right. It's naive to think that every country will welcome this move with open arms.
Yeah.
In fact, some might see it as a direct threat, especially those developing their own CBDCs like China, with its digital yuan.
So instead of collaboration, we could end up in a kind of digital arms race,
Potentially.
with countries competing to develop the most advanced and widely used digital currencies.
It's not out of the realm of possibility. Imagine a world where the U.S. dollar, the digital yuan, and maybe a digital euro are all vying for global dominance.
Oh, wow.
It'd be a recipe for volatility and uncertainty.
And it's not just nation states we need to consider.
Right.
What about the role of powerful tech companies?
Oh, absolutely.
Facebook, Google.
Yes.
They're already dabbling in digital currencies and have massive global reach.
Huge reach.
How do they fit into all of this?
Excellent point. These tech giants could easily become major players in this new financial order,
Yeah.
potentially wielding as much power as some countries.
Yeah.
That's a whole other layer of complexity we need to factor in.
It sounds like we're on the verge of a huge power shift.
It does, doesn't it?
Almost like a Wild West scenario in the world of finance. It's exciting and a little terrifying at the same time.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
This executive order has thrown a wrench into the gears of the global financial system.
Yeah,
We're in uncharted territory here.
totally.
No one can say for certain what the future holds.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this sense that we're at a crossroads.
Yeah.
The way we think about and interact with money is changing right before our eyes.
It really is.
And the choices that are made now, both by governments and individuals, are going to shape the world for generations to come.
Absolutely. It's a time of tremendous opportunity, but also significant risk. The stakes are incredibly high. It's up to each of us to stay informed, stay engaged, and make our voices heard as we navigate this transition to a more digital future.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We hope you found it informative, and as always, we encourage you to continue exploring these complex and fascinating topics.
Absolutely.